Talking about online negotiations, many people only think of email and phone conversation. But there are other options. We can use video, we can use conference tools, or we can use online contracting tools. In this video, I will discuss how to use each of these tools and also when and why we should use each of them. About 70% of all our commercial negotiations are virtual. That means that they are conducted through a phone, through email, or through an online conference tool. About 41% of the virtual negotiations are conducted via email. Quite a lot. However, 96% of the respondents in our survey conducted with IACCM finds that face-to-face meetings are superior and generate more value. And I would actually agree. I would in most cases recommend that a negotiation should take place in face-to-face, since we have the opportunity to shake hands, meet each other, have eye contact, and perhaps even share a meal. It turns out this is a valid concern. Research shows that compared to people who negotiate face-to-face, those who negotiate online are 1. Less likely to reach deals and more likely to end up at a costly impasse. 2. Less likely to develop trust and more likely to lose trust during the actual negotiation. 3. Less likely to build rapport. But should we rule out virtual negotiations then? Of course not. They serve a purpose, and combining them with a face-to-face meeting can not only be efficient and cost-saving, but also add something the process will benefit from. The combination of face-to-face meeting, a phone call, emails, and video conferences can be great if it's used the right way. I will try to share some advice on how to do that the right way. Email negotiations. We tend to fall in the trap of conducting negotiation by email. For several reasons. It's easy, it fits into our timetable, we decide when we negotiate, and it's cheap. But be careful. Written communication is dangerous since it can be interpreted. You have without any doubt experienced to be annoyed, surprised, or angry by an email you received. Be patient with your counterpart and give them the benefit of the doubt. Don't get angry with a short or rude email. Don't interpret the emotion of the counterpart. Take your time to reply and think carefully about your content. Don't argue, but ask questions instead. According to communication studies, the word itself counts for less than 10% of the reason that we trust a counterpart. And the written word in an email is therefore not relationship building in any possible way. When can you use email with a purpose? Well, emails are obviously great for data and facts exchange. Setting up the agenda and exchanging a process, emails should be used as a part of a negotiation in between face-to-face meetings or in between video conferences. Don't ever try and solve conflicts and disagreement through emails. That will simply not work. I have a feeling personally that sometimes negotiators are choosing email negotiations simply because they are trying to avoid a confrontation or conflicts. It is easier being a tough negotiator when you're hiding behind a screen and a keyboard. And people tend to be more aggressive by email than when they're actually meeting face-to-face. Email negotiations are not all bad though. Use them when appropriate, but be aware of their limitations. Do remember that we tend to lie and bluff more in emails than we would do face-to-face. Keep all email exchanges related to a negotiation on a shared drive for internal stakeholders to access and not just your own inbox. You engaged in confidential negotiations with external parties, so do not forget security issues either. Be careful about where you are accessing emails and saving attachment. When sending attachment, make sure that it's not possible to retrieve red line versions or comments from attachment. Use PDF, not Open Word or PPT documents, and unlike face-to-face negotiation, there is a complete record in emails. If there is a dispute later on, all emails related to the negotiation on your server, even if they were deleted by you, can be retrieved and reviewed by your line manager and legal counsel. Take care in what you write. Understand culture when meeting. Face-to-face, you can appreciate cultural differences and accommodate accordingly to ensure successful negotiation. Those differences also exist in writing style and structure across the departments, companies, regions, and countries. Phone negotiation. Communication study tells us that verbal communication accounts for about 38% of the reason that we trust somebody. Phone conversations are therefore obviously superior to email conversations. When should you use negotiation? Well, phone negotiation can be great at solving a conflict or confrontation if you don't have the opportunity of meeting. And phone negotiation can be reasonable substitute for face-to-face meetings or video conference. But be careful. In a phone negotiation, you don't have the option of reading nonverbal language, obviously, body language, and subtle signals, which obviously could cause an increase in misunderstandings. Another big risk using phone negotiation is that they could happen suddenly, which means that you don't have the necessary time to prepare properly. And if the phone suddenly rings, surprisingly, with a new negotiation, ask for a timeout. Tell the counterpart that you're busy, doing something else right now, and if it's possible, calling them back in 5 minutes. Use that time to prepare. An unprepared negotiation is for sure going to be a failed negotiation. Phone negotiation is a great substitute for face-to-face meeting when it is not possible to actually meet up face-to-face. However, make sure that you only use phone negotiations when you have created a relationship with your counterpart. Please remember that cultural differences also have an impact. Different cultures perceive phone conversation differently. In one culture, our commitment by phone is the same as a written agreement. But in another culture, it does not necessarily carry the same weight. Be aware on how to use your voice when negotiating by phone. Since verbal communication carries about 38% of the reason that we trust somebody, your tone of voice, speed, and pauses transmit a lot of value and information to the counterpart. I would advise that phone negotiation is used as a tool in combination with face-to-face and video conferences. Video conferences. Technology is typically complicated, and at the same time it's also a great help. Today we are able to do what we just a few years ago would look like science fiction. We are able to communicate not only by phone or by email, but transmitting a full picture showing our face and even our full body. Video conferences is obviously the next best thing we can do compared to a face-to-face meeting. A video conference are superior, obviously, to both emails negotiation and a phone negotiation, since we can utilize both our verbal communication and our nonverbal communication. One thing you should be aware of prior to your video conferences negotiation is the technology platform. I was recently involved with a client in a negotiation where our pre-negotiation was all about what platform to use. One of the parties in this negotiation had a company policy dictating that they had to use Microsoft Teams. Their counterpart had a company policy dictating that they should be using Zoom for security reasons. The two parties spent an enormous amount of time prior to the actual negotiation just discussing what technology platform they should use for their negotiations. Another important topic is obviously that you have to make sure that the technology is working. It sounds simple, but I have experienced way too many times throughout my career that technology was not working as expected. There were interruptions in communications, all the communication was not clear. Very basically, make sure that you have the necessary bandwidth, and the same goes for your counterpart. Think about a video conference negotiation just like a face-to-face meeting. Remember that being involved in something online is more challenging than being physically there. That means the meeting have to be shorter, you need to be aware of the breaks, and you need to schedule and be very clear about the structure of that negotiation. I will not discuss one technology platform in favor of the other because really it's down to personal taste and preference. Video goes a long way in making it personal and create personalized dynamics. Don't underestimate the importance of small talk in a video to build rapport alongside email. Just because external negotiations are online doesn't mean internal negotiations and planning meetings cannot happen in person. Negotiate on how to negotiate. Regardless whether you are negotiating in a conference room, by phone, by email, or through a video conference tool, you need to read the rules of the game. By rules of the game, I mean how you're going to negotiate with your counterpart. Imagine a negotiation perceived by one party as playing tennis, and it's perceived by the counterpart as identical to playing chess. That would be a very interesting negotiation, wouldn't it? One party would be sitting in the conference room with a racket, trying to play tennis, and the counterpart would be sitting in the same conference room with a chessboard, moving the pieces around on the board. Prior to our negotiation, we have to agree whether we are going to play tennis or whether we're going to play chess. That goes for our virtual negotiation as well. We need to discuss and agree prior to the actual negotiation how we want to conduct that negotiation. Some of the things we need to include in that pre-negotiation discussion are: what is the strategy for this negotiation? Are we going to conduct this negotiation in zero-sum, where the only point is winning at the expense of the counterpart? Are we going to negotiate in partnership, or are we going to negotiate in smartnership? If we decide to negotiate in smartnership, we also need to agree on how to do that. Who's going to open up first? Are we going to be transparent on our cost benefit? How are we going to deal with the decrease in trust if that happens? And how are we going to share the potential in asymmetric values created between the parties? Don't negotiate on different platforms. I don't recommend that you negotiate on social media platforms. Don't conduct your negotiation on Facebook, Twitter, or WhatsApp. Stay on one media platform that is not public, and don't switch back and forth between text, phone, emails, or video conference. Create a structure on how to negotiate with the counterpart. And please remember that conducting written negotiation, everything is obviously recorded. In a face-to-face negotiation, online, unless it's recorded, people will not necessarily remember in detail what you said. Generating value. In a virtual negotiation, we know that creating extra value is more difficult. The asymmetric value being the difference between one party's cost versus the counterpart's value, we call that necroeconomics, focus even more on generating value in a virtual negotiation than you would do in a face-to-face negotiation. Remember that up to 42% of the value is very often undiscovered. Regardless of the choice of virtual negotiation platform, there are a few things that you have to be aware of. Don't rush your opening offer. Too often I've seen online negotiators attempt to blindside the counterpart by smacking down and opening way too early. Yes, it's absolutely true that there is a first mover benefit in negotiation. The one who makes the first offer usually prevails, but this should not translate into showing a term sheet into the virtual hands of the receiving party before you even say hello. Instead, I should suggest you plan your opening offer carefully, but resist presenting it until two things have happened. First and foremost, you have greeted the counterpart and hopefully even smoothed a little small talk. Secondly, you discuss with the counterparty how best to use their time. Research indicates that late first offer, those that are presented after appropriate pleasantries are exchanged and the pre-verbal table is set, are more efficient than early first movers. So by all means, craft your opening offer beforehand, but wait for the right time to reveal it. Just like in face-to-face negotiations, use breaks. Take time out to think things through. It's okay and fully acceptable. Virtual negotiations is here to stay, so approach it with an awareness of the challenges it represents. And keep the tips here firmly in mind. 1. Take steps to create a face-to-face relationship before negotiation or early on, so that there is a face or at least a voice behind the email. 2. Be explicit about the process to be followed during negotiation. Rules of the game. 3. If others are presenting in a virtual negotiation on either your side or the counterpart side, make sure everyone knows who is there and why. 4. Pick the channel, face-to-face, video conference, voice, email, etc. that is most effective at getting all the information and details on the table so that it can be fully considered by both sides. 5. Avoid emotion explosions. When you must express emotions, label the emotion explicitly to the other so they know what it is and what's behind that emotion. 6. Formal turn-taking is not strictly necessary, but try to synchronize offers and counteroffers. Speak up, and if it's unclear whose turn it is, it's important to make that clear. 7. Check out assumptions that you're making about the counterpart's interest, offers, proposal, or conduct. Less face-to-face contact means less information about the counterpart and a greater chance that inferences will get you in trouble, so ask questions. 8. In many virtual negotiations, for instance like email, everything is communicated in writing. So be careful not to make unwise commitment that can be used against you. Neither should you take undue advantage of the counterpart in this way, and discuss and clarify until all agree on the content. 9. It may be easier to use unethical tactics in virtual negotiation because facts are harder to verify, but resist that temptation. The consequences are just as severe and perhaps even more so, given the incriminating evidence available when virtual negotiations are automatically achieved. 10. Not all styles work equally well in all settings. Work to develop the personal negotiation style, collaboration, competition, etc. That is a good fit. 10. Develop your personal style. Not all styles are compatible with all negotiation. So prepare yourself how you want to negotiate, how you want to present yourself, and how you want the counterpart to perceive you. Thank you.